Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. An 86-year-old mystery has finally been solved. It has been part of Vic Svec's life for as long as he can remember. The mystery goes all the way back to August 24th, 1934. That's 86 years ago today. And it was captured in the pages of the Baltimore Evening Sun. Growing up in Belleville, Illinois, Vic Svec read that story, never having any idea that one day he would find the clues that solved it. And he joins us today to tell this story from his home in Belleville. So, Vic Svec, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here.
So, Vic, that story in the Baltimore Evening Sun that I referenced, this was about your father, Joseph. What did it tell you about what happened to him on August 24th, 1934?
Well, that's right. It was an interesting story, probably both from a personal perspective, but also it got a lot of ink in those days. So here you are in 1934, Baltimore, Maryland, kind of throes of the Great Depression. And of course, it relates to my dad. And the story references a foundling around police seeking parents of an infant left in an automobile. And the story is told of a woman, Mrs. Bradley was her name, Clara Bradley, and her sons, John and Francis, who come into town from Havre de Grace, which is in Harford County, Maryland. It's a suburb probably similar to like a St. Charles County or the east side would be the St. Louis, on the evening of the 24th of August. And what they tell the police and then the reporter is that they had come in on a Sunday night around 9:30 in the evening, and they were near Penn Station, train station in Baltimore. And at that point, when they were getting they were getting out of the car, getting ready to go into the train station, a car pulled up behind them. And the woman here cites that another woman had approached her. Woman was in a dark sedan. She said it had DC plates. There was a couple in the back seat. She described them fairly specifically: a young couple, a woman wearing a light dress and a hat, a man in a seersucker suit, and they had asked her about where the St. Vincent's orphanage was. And Clara, the woman who had driven into the train station, said, "I'm sorry, I really don't live in the city here. I don't know that much about it. I'm from outside the city." And she went on her way. She went into the train station, came out about an hour later, met up with her two sons, and as they were approaching their car, they heard a baby crying. Well, it turned out the baby was the person who would become my dad. He was in a cardboard box in the back seat of their car. So she then goes to a policeman, goes in, tells the lieutenant her story. The newspaper picks up on the details of this, and they really put out a pretty prominent piece in the Baltimore Sun. It also gets picked up by the Washington Star at the time and the Washington Post because of the D.C. plates. And in fact, the story says they're now turning their attention to Washington in an attempt to find the parents, that they had indeed passed the baby on to St. Vincent's Orphanage. The baby has a medal around its neck, a Sacred Heart medal, but very little is known. And they're even saying they're citing that there was a cardboard box that looked to be from a soap manufacturer in New Jersey, and perhaps they could find out a bit more from this. So it was quite, you can imagine, quite this like CSI Baltimore 1934 story. We always, of course, loved the story because it was about my dad, who had spent a bit of time in the orphanage before the adoptive grandparents, of whom my last name comes from, Svec, had adopted him from there.
And I understand he was not in that orphanage for very long. Is that correct?
That's right. He was there, we think, about 12 to 15 months.
Okay. And this mystery of these people that deposited him before Clara Bradley and her sons found him, that's something that was never found. The newspapers were obviously all in on the details, but the biological parents never came forward.
That's exactly right. They did not. And, there was some curiosity over time about it. What were the circumstances? A bit of speculation. Was it someone who thought, okay, here, people who have a car in 1934 Depression-era Baltimore, perhaps they can care well for this baby, so that's why the baby had been left in the back seat. But really, it was the coldest of cold cases. Probably back about 30 years ago, I was in Baltimore on business, visited a little family, and I asked a few questions. But there was no way to really try to pin this down. The orphanage had been long gone at the time, no real police records that we were aware of, and in any event, the child had been abandoned, so no connectivity to the familial line there.
And you had grown up just interested in this story in a way that your own father, it seems like he was pretty content with his adopted parents. He didn't want these answers, but you did. And is that why your wife ended up getting you the 23andMe for Christmas?
Well, yeah, and in fact, certainly people will say, well, were you looking to find out who your real grandparents were? It's like, I know who my real grandparents were. They were the Svecs, a wonderful couple. They raised my dad in terrific fashion. But there was always, I think, this just natural curiosity about it. My dad was usually disinterested for pretty much the same reasons. He said he knows who his parents were, and I think as much as anything. So I was a journalism student. I've been in communications most of my life, and I enjoyed this. I enjoyed how it was treated as a bit of a mystery at the time by these prominent Northeastern publications.
Mm-hmm. But so you ended up doing this DNA test after your wife gave this to you. You got your results back, and it actually took your wife to understand the connection to this story you'd always been told. What did she realize after you got these results back and spent some time looking at them?
So it was really pretty fascinating because we took a 23andMe test, or I took a 23andMe test, and again we were hopeful that perhaps it would connect us to some people, particularly on my father's side, in part just to solve the mystery, if you will, or to try to advance our knowledge of it, and in part even for practical reasons, healthcare history, those types of things. So yes, for Christmas, my wife had gotten me a 23andMe test. Probably took me a month or so to get around to it, and then I'm going to say probably in early February maybe we had gotten the results back. And for any of those who've taken the test, they know you really ring up a whole host of relatives that can go down to sixth cousins, seventh cousins. There were literally, I think, 1,400 people roughly that were shown to be related to me, and some of them were obviously on my mom's side, and it kind of separated out those, and then some on my dad's side, and a whole variety of names. But we pretty quickly zeroed in on the fact that there were some names from the Maryland area there that obviously were more than a coincidence, and a host of names there. But one name that we saw probably 3, 4, 5 times was the name Bradley. So we thought, we're probably on to something here.
And so you saw that name Bradley, but it took your wife to realize the connection with this story from the Baltimore Evening Sun. She realized Bradley had been the name of the woman who found this baby. And when she first posed this theory to you, were you like, yep, holy cow, this is, there's a connection here. Clara Bradley, who found the baby, I'm related to Bradleys.
Absolutely. My wife has always been a terrific Sherlock Holmes and always gets to the answer on whodunit mysteries far quicker than I in movies and such. And sure enough, we had my daughter Stephanie, Diana, and I had all been kind of working this through various ancestry elements. And I had sort of pulled back out this yellowed copy of the newspaper, and we were glancing at it one evening, and she said, my wife said, "Did you see the name there?" And I said, "What? What?" She's like, "Mrs. Bradley, Clara Bradley." She's like, "Bradley was the woman who claims to have had the baby left in the back seat, but that's who you're related to, are the Bradleys." And I had read right past that because it was never really relevant what her name was through this time. And as my wife said, it was quite the mic drop moment. We sort of, our jaws dropped and we looked at each other and said, "This was an inside job." All these years thinking, buying into what had really been an elaborate cover story, and as it turned out, it was really Clara and her sons that were most likely related to, that were related to this baby.
And as you say, what a mic drop moment. We're talking to Vic Svec about his family story and the mystery he recently solved. And we do need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation and what happened once Vic got this information. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. We'll return to our conversation with Vic Svec in just a moment. First, here's a local news update. A new Metro Transit System policy allows the agency to suspend riders who cause problems. The Ride and Abide policy took effect in July. So far, 5 people have been suspended for 1 year each. 3 people assaulted fellow passengers or employees, and 2 committed multiple acts of vandalism. The St. Louis Board of Building Appeals has denied an appeal from the owner of an urban farm condemned by the city. Perennial City Farms owner Tim Kiefer is accused of failing to apply for an occupancy permit for his North St. Louis farm. Neighbors have complained about odors. Kiefer could now secure the proper permits or appeal the decision. He has, however, already moved much of the operation to another location. And we're looking into yesterday's partial collapse of the historic Lemp Brewery complex in South St. Louis. Amid the rubble were roughly 700 bicycles from local nonprofit St. Louis Bee Works. On Wednesday, Bee Works president will join us on this program. We'll also talk to a historian about the sprawling brewery complex. It was built in the 1860s. Join St. Louis Public Radio this afternoon for local and regional news, and throughout the day on our website, that's stlpublicradio.org. And now back to our conversation. We're talking to Vic Svec. He's a businessman who grew up in Belleville, lives there today. And as he grew up, his father's biological relatives were a mystery. As a baby, Joseph Svec had been found on a viaduct in Baltimore. This is in August of 1934. A woman said she'd found him there. She also said she'd been approached by a young woman asking for directions to an orphanage, and then the young woman sped off in a car with DC plates. Well, that woman was Clara Bradley, and Vic Svec's family, just before the break, we learned that she was a blood relative of the baby that she quote-unquote found. So, Vic, your daughter Stephanie Mueller made the breakthrough of finding the present-day Bradleys, which was key into understanding more about this mystery, and she did that on Facebook. She found a group called We Are Bradley, but to get there, first she had to find the modern-day relatives' names. And so Stephanie Mueller explained how she finally found the modern-day descendants of Mrs. Frances Bradley.
I mean, it probably took me several weeks or a month where I was trying to find, how Ancestry.com is set up. You can search for things all different ways. And so I went in and, had so many different searches where I'm trying to find a Frances Bradley. And it was like, is it saying Mrs. Frances Bradley because that's her name? Or is it saying Mrs. Frances Bradley because that was her husband's name? And so, all kinds of different ways of looking. And I ended up finding a family tree. Heather Bradley had a family tree that actually had Mrs. Clara Kerr was her maiden name. She's married to John. They had 2 sons. John was one. And the year he was born would have matched up with the age. And then Francis, who we've since found out he went by Rush, his age matched up as well. I think they were 24 and 17 at the time. But anyway, I told my dad, I go, oh my gosh, I think I found the family tree.
And indeed she had. That was Stephanie Mueller, Vic's daughter. She also found lots of old Bradley photos that had been posted on Ancestry.com, and she saw a clear resemblance to you, Vic. And it was those photos that led her to the Facebook group We Are Bradley. One of them had been cropped in a way that you could actually see the name of the Facebook group. She followed that through, figured out these were the modern-day Bradleys. Vic, you must have been worried that by posting within this group your family's story, you were about to kick over a hornet's nest. Did you have some trepidation about doing that?
There was a little bit of concern. You know, this you certainly don't want to be spoiling the family gene pool or upsetting the apple cart or whatever your analogy might be. But at the same time, to be fair, first of all, this was something that was 86 years old. This wasn't something that just happened 3 years ago. Secondly, we came in interested, curious, joyous about it. Obviously, I wouldn't be here right now nor would Stephanie if Clara's family would have made a different choice at some point along the way there, and my dad wouldn't have been given up for adoption.
Yeah, you weren't angry that they had done this. You were just, as you say, approaching with joy and curiosity. And so you shared on this Facebook group what you thought had happened, that Clara Bradley may have been your grandmother great-grandmother. And then a woman posted, a member of this group, the story is all true. Where were you when you saw her post that message?
Yeah, it's a great point. This was probably, we call it 4 Sundays ago, and my daughter Steph had told us around 10:30 on actually a Saturday night, and she said, "Dad, you got to go to the We Are Bradley Facebook site." Well, it really laid out an interesting story because I had reached out to the administrator of the site through a private message, sent the original Baltimore Sun story, and she had posted, she's like, I guess this is possible, and she posted it out there for the other Bradleys, and it really set off quite a bit of questioning. Is this Aunt Liz? Is this Aunt Betty that we know of? So the name of the woman is Mary Elizabeth Bradley. Interestingly, could have only her out of Clara's family, because while Clara had 10 children, she only had 1 girl, and the rest were all boys there. So it had been our working theory that it was probably Mary Elizabeth as my dad's birth mom. A woman by the name of Clara Bradley, ironically the namesake, the granddaughter, who's now 79 years old, had posted later on that afternoon on the site, to your point, this story is all true. And then she posted a few other things where she said, I remember my parents talking about this. I remember getting some letters from my aunt when I was younger. And so really kind of an overwhelming moment that ended a lot of the discussion and dissension, if you will, around whether this was, somebody made a reference to possible fake news and such, that, so you could see the natural skepticism. Somebody comes in claiming they're in your family.
It's good to have some skepticism there.
That's right. It's healthy.
But the woman who ended up really confirming things for you, that woman was Clara Valek. Her father was one of the boys there that day when her mother, Clara Bradley, supposedly found baby Joseph. That was her grandmother, Clara Bradley, who found baby Joseph. And Clara Valek spoke to me last week, and she explained her reaction to Vic Svec's Facebook post.
I was really surprised, but I believed it from the get-go. I found the fact with the names, the ages at the time, that it would almost be impossible for somebody to make that story up.
So what made you decide to write right there on this Facebook page where so many people could see it? Yeah, the story is all true.
Just so Vic wouldn't have any doubts. I mean, I still have family members that I'm not really sure, just either are not interested, don't believe it, don't want to be part of it. I just thought personally that I put myself in Vic's spot, and if my father, I found out he had been adopted, I would want to know as much about him as I could. Anyway, I just thought he had to know that I supported his search, whatever he found out. I hate secrets.
And that is Clara Valek. She told me she's the oldest living relative now, so she felt a special responsibility to try to share as much info as she could. And the irony of this is that your mystery now has some parts of it are solved. It appears that Mary Elizabeth Bradley was 21 at the time, that your father would have been her biological baby. But the Bradley family now has a lot of mysteries of their own that they're dealing with, even as yours is solved. And Clara Valek told me what she now wonders about.
I wish I knew who the dad was. I wish I knew why my grandmother and her other children, why they felt it necessary to keep it a secret. Why did they go to all the trouble to make up, which in my mind is such a fabricated story of the baby, getting to the orphanage. So I don't know if it was just the times, but I mean, it was, I had no clue that had happened.
And that is Clara Valek. And her father, of course, was there that day. She says she really wonders what had happened where this family felt that it had to keep so many things a secret. And Vic, we just have a couple minutes left here. And it's such an interesting story. This woman who was now your father's mother, she's passed away. But I know that you feel good about having this information, even though you'll never get to meet this woman who did this. What makes this something where it feels good to you to know this information?
Oh, I think it's just the satisfaction of a puzzle solved, as well as really what was an overwhelming kind of first contact, if you will, phone call that we had with Clara. And, as much as anything, let's face it, we've all been going through the drab days of pandemics and other concerns. And some people pay good money for a 1-hour escape room. We had a 5-minute, a 5-month puzzle going on that was ultimately solved, and so that was extremely satisfying and a really a conclusion that was far more rewarding than probably anything we could have imagined going into this. We certainly didn't think a cold case was going to get warmer with the passing of years, but thanks to both technology and people, we were able to bring it together in a really enjoyable way. And I should note that both the Baltimore Sun and the Washington Post have both run follow-up features 86 years later on this story as well.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And those are both linked on our website if people want to read those. And Vic, in our last 30 seconds here, I know your daughter Stephanie told us that this has you guys all talking so much more as you learn more. Has this brought your family closer together?
Oh, absolutely. It's been enjoyable. It's been fun. We've been able to use our various skill sets and personalities and really kind of plunged into it in a very satisfying way. So, and it's really, frankly, gotten me more interested both in genealogy as well as existing family that maybe I've let grown a little too distant.
Well, it's great to have these answers, and I know Clara Valek is really interested in meeting you and your family in real life, and I hope that will happen. So, Vic Svec, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, it's been a pleasure.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.